Well, we get a lot of our information of Jesus, of course, from the four Gospels, and we get segments of Jesus's life throughout the epistles and also the book of Revelation. There are many people who are aware of the manuscript evidence that we have. There are literally tens of thousands, I believe, of manuscripts that confirm the New Testament. However, within these manuscripts, there are also literally thousands of errors. And so people will point to these errors and say, well, you can't trust the New Testament documents because they're so full of errors. Now, once again, what's your take on that one?
Well, this is also a hobby horse of Bart Ehrman, okay? And Bart actually writes in two different arenas. He writes in the academic arena, and he also writes in the popular arena. And in his popular books, he plays this tune very aggressively, okay? But in his academic work, when he knows his peers are looking over his shoulder, he is much more reserved about his conclusions about the differences you cite. So he's actually right, and so are the critics. There are something like 300,000 words in the New Testament, and there are more than 400,000 variants. Now, you use the word error. That's actually technically not accurate because not all the variants are errors. I mean, somewhere there is an accurate rendering, presumably, but let's just call them what the scholars call them, variants. That means there are differences between the different manuscripts. And the reason there's so many differences is because there's so many manuscripts. So the bad news is kind of the good news. You have tens of thousands of manuscripts. You have Greek manuscripts. These are all written, by the way, handwritten manuscripts. And so that's why you're going to have variations. We didn't have printing press until 1,500 years later, right? And so you're going to have variations. People make little mistakes, and there are going to be differences. And by the way, any difference is counted as a variant. So when you hear 300,000 words and 400,000 variants, it sounds like you can't trust a single word in the New Testament. But that's not the way it works. When one looks more closely at what the details are, and here the devil is in the details, it turns out that that most of the variants, the vast majority of the variants, are spelling differences. All right. So if one document has, we'll just use the English for the sake of illustration, has Jesu, Jesu, which is the way some languages pronounce Jesus, Jesu Cristo, that's Spanish. We say Jesus Christ. One says Jesu and one says Jesus. It adds the S. Yeah. Listen, there's no confusion about what that word means, whether it's spelled with the S or not. All right? But every single time the S is dropped, I'm just thinking conceptually here, that's considered a variant. If it is dropped 10,000 times, that's 10,000 variants that mean absolutely nothing. Okay, so the vast majority of all of those variants are variants like that. All right, and that means that the variation makes no difference to us capturing the original text, and that's what we're after here. What did the original say? So we can sweep away a massive number of those variants. Other ones are not spelling errors, but are things like when James's name might be there, and sometimes it has an article. So it says, and James did such and so, or it might say, and the James did such and so. Yeah. It's pretty clear that the added to James makes no difference in the meaning and in recapturing the original meaning. So I'm just giving two examples there. I don't want to be tedious with so many examples, but it turns out that when you remove all of those absolutely inconsequential differences, when I say absolutely inconsequential, they have no bearing on us regaining the original. Then you have a much smaller group left. But it turns out a lot of those differences are valid differences, but we can figure out which one's the right one. If you have 10 passages that says James and then one that says the James, to use that illustration again, well, we know that the 10 are probably, and they're earlier manuscripts, well, those guys are probably right, and this is the mistake. So this removes a whole bunch more, okay? And then the ones that you're not sure of, most of those don't make any difference to any detail of meaning of the text, whether and then when you each time you go through these variants, you can whittle away more as to their significance to regaining the original.
Yeah.
All right. And so once you do all of that, there's almost nothing left of significance. What's left? The long ending of Mark. Well, everybody knows that that's probably added later. The woman caught in adultery that we find in John chapter 8? 6 and 7 and 8. Starts in 7. Yeah, and comes in 8. Thanks for that help. But that, we know that's not in the oldest documents, okay? And so we know that. And so does Bart Ehrman. The point is, we are able to reconstruct using the skills that somebody like Bart Ehrman has to weed out the things that we have very high confidence don't belong there, so that what's left is the heart and soul of the original document. And Bart Ehrman acknowledges that to be the case, especially in his academic work. There is nothing that is contested of significance, certainly theological significance or historical significance about Jesus, as to being able to reconstruct the original. Nothing is in question there. Even the stuff in the long ending of Mark, except for the snake handling stuff, you've got that repeated in other areas that there is no question about the legitimacy of the documentation there. So this turns out to be, Paul, a kind of common canard that people raise to create doubt.
Sure.
And even Bart Ehrman has done it in his popular works. But I don't think he's done it illicitly, because in his more academic works, he's much more reserved and more careful because he knows people are looking over his shoulder. The fact is, we don't have any good academic reason, with the abundance of manuscript evidence that we have in our possession now, to doubt that what we have in the record is substantially accurate, certainly in all the theological or historical points.
Which is the important thing, really, is that we can get back to the theology of the first century church.
Yes. Yeah. There's no question about that at all. I was talking with a young lady yesterday about some manuscript says that these demons cannot be cast out unless you have prayer and fasting, and another account says just prayer. It left out the fasting. Well, was fasting in there or not? And I said, I don't know, but I hope it wasn't in there because I don't like fasting. I'd rather just pray. But you see how that's not a really relevant factor in the big picture. I mean, if you're into demons, casting demons out, that might matter, but this is not even a tertiary issue in Christianity. That's way off in the distance. The main things, the plain things, are solidly attested to by reliable documents from antiquity.